Hello there. Welcome to this video. Today, we will be talking about how to promote strategically self-regulated language learning in our teaching contexts, based on the strategically self-regulated model of language learning. The importance of promoting strategically self-regulated language learning and strategy instruction lies at the heart of providing learners with the skills, alongside the proper teacher support and curricula, to play a more active role in managing and controlling their learning process. As a result, learners can maximize their learning outcomes. Overall, making our learners aware of strategies and self-regulated learning can result in better learners. Let's begin. Self-regulated L2 learning strategies are defined as deliberate, goal-oriented attempts to manage and control efforts to learn the L2. These strategies are teachable actions that can be chosen from a broad list of different alternatives to be employed consciously depending on the learning purpose. The strategically self-regulated model of language learning contemplates three strategy dimensions: cognitive, affective, and socio-cultural interactive. These dimensions of strategy classification play an important role in the L2 learning process. Cognitive strategies help the learner construct, transform, and apply L2 knowledge. Affective strategies help the learner create positive emotions and attitudes and stay motivated. Socio-cultural interactive strategies help the learner with communication, social cultural context, and identity. Now, let's look at each of the strategy dimensions in more detail. To do so, I will name the strategy dimension, its purpose, the strategies within each of the dimensions, their basic functions, and provide sample tactics of how to implement each strategy. At the end of each dimension, I will ask you to think about how and when to use the strategy in your teaching context with your learners. Earlier, we mentioned that cognitive strategies help the learner construct, transform, and apply L2 knowledge. The strategically self-regulated model of language learning contemplates 6 cognitive strategies. The 6 cognitive strategies are the following: using the senses to understand and remember, activating knowledge, reasoning, conceptualizing with details, conceptualizing broadly, and going beyond the immediate data. Using the senses to understand and remember. This cognitive strategy has the basic function of using the visual, auditory, tactile and kinesthetic, or combined senses to understand and remember. For instance, you have given your learners the task of learning common irregular verbs. You can suggest them to look for images of the verbs, or create a mental association of the verbs they are learning, or suggesting your learners to go to YouTube to see if there is a video on the topic they are reading in class to help them better understand the topic. Activating knowledge. This cognitive strategy has the basic functions of brainstorming, using visual images to activate knowledge, and using information internalization in reverse. For instance, having your learners brainstorm what they already know about a topic before reading, or using a KWL chart to identify what they know, what they want to know, and what they have learned, or when they need to use a phrase or idiomatic expression and can't remember it, suggest them to remember the original associations they made when they learned the expressions. Reasoning. This cognitive strategy involves the following basic functions: using inductive and deductive reasoning. For instance, suggesting your learners to try to figure out the grammar rules based on the evidence from the readings even before the teacher explains, or suggesting them to apply a newly learned grammar rule to different situations immediately after having learnt it. Conceptualizing with details. This cognitive strategy has the following basic functions: making distinctions, sequencing, analyzing and decoding, classifying and categorizing, comparing and contrasting across languages, making hierarchies of ideas. For instance, suggesting your learners to distinguish between more important and less important information when they read in the second language, or suggesting them to draw a storyline so they can remember the order of events in the short story, or suggesting them to break sentences into subject, verbs, adverbs and so on to get the meaning, or suggesting them to classify words by their features, noun, verbs, adjectives, and by their topics, and write labels so everything is clear, or suggesting them to compare what they know in English to what they know in Spanish, or suggesting them to organize their knowledge starting with details and going to the main categories. Conceptualizing broadly. This cognitive strategy involves the following basic functions: synthesizing across several sources, summarizing and getting the gist, combining and linking similar things. For instance, suggesting your learners to synthesize the main points of what they have learned from multiple sources before the weekly test, or suggesting them to skim the article briefly before reading it to get the gist of what it's about, suggesting them to read the beginning and the end of the text, and then some of the topic sentences, so that they can get the main idea before reading the whole text, or suggesting them to create a semantic map linking the ideas about a given topic. Going beyond the immediate data. This cognitive strategy has the following basic functions: predicting and inferring. For instance, suggesting your learners to approach a listening task by predicting what the speaker will say based on all the possible clues, then to check their accuracy as the speaker goes further, or to infer the meaning when they are listening, using all the background clues, ambient noise, how fast the person is speaking, the tone of voice, and combine it with what they already know, or suggesting them to use situational and linguistic clues to help them understand the meaning of what is being said. Remember, cognitive strategies help the learner construct, transform, and apply L2 knowledge. Remember, there are 6 cognitive strategies. Using the senses to understand and remember. Activating knowledge. Reasoning. Conceptualizing with details. Conceptualizing broadly. And going beyond the immediate data. Can you think of other ways in which you can apply cognitive strategies with your learners? Think about specific actions, situations, and learning goals. You can pause the video to think about the question. If it helps you, rewind the video as many times as you like. Moving on, the strategically self-regulated model of language learning contemplates 2 effective strategies. Effective strategies are used to handle emotions, beliefs, attitudes, and motivation in L2 learning. The 2 effective strategies are the following: activating supportive emotions, beliefs, and attitudes, generating and maintaining motivation. Activating supportive emotions, beliefs, and attitudes. This effective strategy has the following basic functions: expressing feelings or being in touch with feelings, relaxing, creating a positive emotion via thoughts and statements, creating a positive emotion with colors, substituting positive emotions, beliefs, and attitudes for negative ones, using positive self-talk for the short term, using positive self-talk for the long term, using paradoxical intention to reduce anxiety, setting low expectations, and using self-handicapping to provide a failure excuse and improve self-esteem. For instance, suggesting them to talk to a friend or tutor if they feel upset with themselves about their progress in the second language, or suggesting your learners to use deep breathing, listen to music, or think of something positive as a way to relax or get themselves in a good mood before they have to give a talk in the second language, start class, or when they are feeling anxious, or when they feel the English lesson is difficult. Instead of feeling down, suggest them to think of how privileged they are to be studying English, or suggesting them to encourage themselves to stay motivated and keep trying, or suggesting them to think about how good they will feel when they reach the intermediate level of English, or suggesting them to intentionally make a mistake to make a joke about a mistake, so that they will not be so anxious about making one. Suggest them to intentionally expect to do poorly in a given task, so that when they do better they can feel good about themselves, or suggesting them make the English task much harder than it has to be by adding extra steps or more details. That way if they bomb the task, they will have a good excuse, but if they do well, they will feel great about themselves and what they achieved. Generating and maintaining motivation. This effective strategy has the following basic functions. Using positive imagery for expectations. Using self-handicapping as a positive challenge. Using self-entertainment to stay motivated. Increasing extrinsic motivation by considering instrumental use of the L2. Increasing extrinsic motivation by considering future rewards or future good feelings. Increasing extrinsic motivation regarding integration into the culture. Increasing intrinsic motivation. Using defensive pessimism as a motivator. Using positive self-talk for motivation. Strengthening motivation through counter-discourses. Using negative self-talk or negative self-assessment as a prod to improve. Posing a negative outcome and working to avoid it. For instance, suggesting them to envision that they will perform well on the English certification exam. It helps to have a positive image, or suggesting them that when they are getting tired and want to quit doing their English homework, to tell themselves how much this means to their future career, or suggesting them to motivate themselves by planning to do a leisure activity after finishing the lesson or the homework, or increasing their motivation by realizing that they can use the language. In order to get to know English speakers, create deep friendships, and immerse themselves in the culture, or suggesting your learners to use defensive pessimism, telling themselves that they will do poorly in the debate in English so that they will not lose their motivation entirely if this happens. If they do better, that's great, or suggesting them to tell themselves that they cannot possibly make more of a fool of themselves than their most embarrassing moment, so they might as well not worry and just do it, or suggesting them to study hard in English so that they will avoid bad grades and will not feel bad about themselves. Remember, effective strategies help the learner handle their emotions, beliefs, attitudes, and motivation in L2 learning. Remember, there are two effective learning strategies. Activating supportive emotions, beliefs, and attitudes. Generating and maintaining motivation. Can you think of other ways in which you can apply effective strategies with your learners? Think about the specific actions, situations, and learning goals. You can pause the video to think about the question. If it helps you, rewind the video as many times as you like. Finally, the strategically self-regulated model of language learning contemplates 3 socio-cultural interactive strategies. Socio-cultural interactive strategies are used to deal with issues of context, communication, and culture in the L2 learning. The 3 socio-cultural interactive strategies are the following. Interacting to learn and communicate. Overcoming knowledge gaps in communicating in order to continue to speak, listen, and learn. Dealing with social cultural context and identities. Interacting to learn and communicate. This socio-cultural interactive strategy has the following basic functions. Interacting online or in person. Working with a mentor or tutor. Asking for explanation, clarification, verification, or repetition, or asking questions non-verbally. For instance, suggesting them to form a study group with friends, so they can study before the test, or suggest them to work with a mentor who has a higher level of language proficiency than them, or suggesting your learners whenever they don't understand what the teacher is saying about today's assignment, to ask their friend to explain it to them, or suggest them to write down questions to ask a distance tutor, a friend, or the teacher. Overcoming knowledge gaps in communicating in order to continue to speak, listen, and learn. This socio-cultural interactive strategy has the following basic functions. Using other words and physical cues to continue to communicate despite the gap in knowledge. Changing the topic. And pretending to understand. For instance, suggesting your learners to make up a new word while they are talking if they don't know the right one, just so they can stay in the conversation. Often it is the right word, or suggesting them that if they don't know a word, to talk around it, describe it, or use a synonym, or suggesting them that if they don't know a word, to use gestures to signify the word physically, or suggest them to change the topic to something that they find easier to talk about in a conversation, or Suggest them to pretend to understand so that the conversation will continue. Dealing with social-cultural context and identities. This socio-cultural interactive strategy has the following basic functions. Imitating cultural behaviors. Exploring the meaning of social roles, identity, power, and the media. Considering what is expected for entry into the imagined community. Using counter-discourses opposite stories to gain social-cultural acceptance. Exploring social-cultural meanings about silence, body language, and social customs. For instance, suggest them to imitate the cultural behaviors of others, who are of their same gender and general age to help them fit in while in a foreign country, or suggest them to consider all the social and linguistic competencies they will need to fit in a foreign country, or suggest them that when people judge them negatively in a foreign country, to communicate their own positive view of themselves, and how they are different, why they are interesting and why they should get together. To talk. Remember, socio-interactive strategies are used to deal with issues of context, communication and culture in the L2 learning. Remember, there are 3 social interactive strategies. Interacting to learn and communicate. Overcoming knowledge gaps in communicating in order to continue to speak, listen and learn. Dealing with social cultural context and identities. Can you think of other ways in which you can apply socio-interactive strategies with your learners? Think about the specific actions, situations, and learning goals. You can pause the video to think about the question. If it helps you, rewind the video as many times as you like. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.